Our group did our lab on acid rain. We tested the effects of sulfuric acid on pork, fish, aluminum foil, and limestone. We used water as a controlled variable to test on all of those materials as well. The materials we used were 40 milliliters of sulfuric acid, 40 milliliters of distilled water, 2 pieces of pH paper, 1 large piece of aluminum foil, 1 piece of finger-sized fish meat, 1 piece of finger-sized pork, 2 pieces of limestone, CaCO3, 2 beakers, and 8 clear glasses, as well as a pair of tweezers. We set up our lab so we could easily take observations. The materials that would react with the sulfuric acid were placed on the left. The materials that we would pour distilled water into are placed on the right. On both sides, pork is on the left, then fish, then limestone or CaCO3, and finally aluminum foil. After 6 minutes, our lab was running smoothly. The acid pork as well as the acid fish were both whiter. The acid limestone, or CaCO3, produced quite a few bubbles, and the acid aluminum was producing some bubbles as well. On the water side, no change was recorded in either the pork or the fish. In the water CaCO3, there were very few bubblings, and in the aluminum, there were no changes at all. After 10 minutes, there were still no changes on the water side on the aluminum, and a few more bubbles were being released in the limestone. Still no change in the pork or fish as well. On the acid side, still more bubbles coming out of the aluminum, still more bubbles coming out of the limestone, and the fish and pork were even whiter than before. After roughly 13 minutes, the fish and beef looked incredibly white. The limestone was still producing bubbles. Hopefully you can see a couple there. The acid aluminum was producing a tiny bit of bubbles still. The pork and fish on the water side, still no reaction. The CaCO3, quite a few less bubbles than on the acid side, however there were still some. And the aluminum on the water side had no change whatsoever. After 20 minutes, there was quite a few changes on the acidic side. The pork and fish still were white and becoming whiter. The CaCO3 was still producing bubbles. The aluminum still producing bubbles, however, still not quite as much as we had predicted. On the water side, everything was still the same, no changes in the aluminum, pork, and fish, however, there was a tiny bit of bubbles in the limestone. As you can see, the acid fish is a lot different from the water fish. It's a lot whiter in the liquid in comparison to the water fish, and it looks slightly more shriveled as well. For the acid pork and acid water, we observed similar things. The acid pork looked much more whiter than it had started and from the water pork, and it was also more shriveled. For the limestone, unfortunately there weren't too many observations that we could make without massing the limestone. However, the acid limestone did seem a tiny bit smaller. For the aluminium, we could observe nothing particularly in the beakers. However, later when we took them out, we observed more. Right now they both look the same. The limestone was massed again after the reaction, and we compared it to its mass before the reaction. The water limestone decreased in 1/1000th of a gram, and the limestone that was placed in acid decreased in 5/1000ths of a gram. We removed all the meats from the beakers. Here is the acid pork. It's a lot wider on the left, which was the side placed in the acid. There's the water pork. It looks fairly similar to how it began with. The acid fish is a lot more whiter and shriveled than the water fish. Here's the aluminium foil that was placed in the sulfuric acid. As you can see right there, that was the part that was touching the acid. It's a lot less lustrous than the other side that was not in the acid. Here is the aluminium that was placed in water. It reflects lights on all sides in every direction, showing that the water did not have any effect, while the sulfuric acid did. Here is the meat in a paper bag. We felt it for texture. We noticed both the pork and fish meat that were in the sulfuric acid were a lot harder, and they were almost cooked. Unlike the water pork and the water fish meat, they were hard, and as you can see here, the fish meat in the sulfuric acid was brown, and the water, fish meat, and pork were still mushy.